Dr. Zeke Emanuel. Hey, Zeke, let's talk, first of all, just based on again, it's just a scarce bit of information that you have, but prostate cancer that's spread to the bone, what's the prognosis?
Well, first of all, I want to express my sympathy, and I hope Joe responds to treatment, President Biden, very well. The fact is that very few people get diagnosed this advanced. About 7% of all prostate cancer in the country gets diagnosed when you have a lesion that's in the bone, and therefore it's metastatic and incurable. The prostate cancer will not go away. He will have it. That doesn't mean he's going to die from it, because there are a lot of treatments. There's androgen blockade, that's basically preventing the testosterone from circulating. There's also androgen receptor signaling inhibitors, a second line of treatment that prevents when the androgen does bind to the cell from it doing its action and turning on genes. So there's a lot there, and then there's chemotherapy beyond that. There's also treatment for that metastatic lesion near the spine if it's a threat. So he has a lot of treatments, and he could live a long time. We just don't know.
Yeah, you had said that very few people have it actually diagnosed at this late stage, that's rare. Doesn't it take some time for prostate cancer to develop to a point where it would spread to the bones?
Oh, he's had this for many years, maybe even a decade, growing there and spreading. That's right. It's a little surprising. I look back at the records, and there's no evidence that when he got his health status and the medical records were released that he had a prostate-specific antigen. Now, it is true that a lot of people recommend not doing a prostate-specific antigen after 70, but President Biden's been in public life a very long time. He was vice president and had a lot of exams under 70. So it's a little surprising that they didn't do it, and maybe President Biden decided he didn't want the test. Many men do decide they don't want a PSA. But this is, it is also aggressive. When we talk about aggressive, part of what we mean is that Gleason score. That score is from it's 2 up to 10. And he's at a 9. And that means that the cancer doesn't look normal. It looks very abnormal, which is probably why it's in the bone. And as you point out, Joe, it's been around for a very long time in President Biden years. Exactly how many we don't know, obviously. And it is a little surprising to many of us oncologists that he wasn't diagnosed earlier.
So you had said that some men do not get prostate exams after the age of 70, but some men, most men, aren't president of the United States. If you were a president's physician and trying to figure out how the state of his health and how he was doing, would this not seem to be a very normal routine test that you would insist the president have?
Well, it's a complicated area. So because it's slow going, a lot of people say unless the individual has 10 or more years to live, estimated, that you don't do this test. And then if they do, you have a discussion with them about whether to actually perform the test. I don't know what happened in that discussion. There are people, and I'm actually one of them, that would say, I don't want to see that test, because part of that test is you get a lot of overtreatment. It's not a very accurate test. Sometimes people say take the test and then you can do an MRI to evaluate whether, if you get a high score, whether in fact there is cancer there or a lesion that would require biopsying. So
Right.
there's a lot of recommendation to discuss it. I don't know what President Biden and his doctor discussed, but I think you are hinting at the other element, which is that President Obama had this test, President Bush had this test. It is a little surprising that the doctor didn't take it, and if he took it and didn't report it and it was elevated, that is another case of doctors not being straightforward with us. We've had several of them with President Trump, especially around his COVID diagnosis. And if that is true, that would be very troubling.
Again, Zeke, you're an oncologist, obviously incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years? Oh,
more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you are saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
And I'm just curious again, if your doctor to a president of the United States that is a male, that is an older man, would a prostate test, and again, we're just talking about a PSA screening, a blood test that you could do along with all the other blood tests. It's not even that it would be intrusive. Would this not be one of the first tests that you would conduct as a White House doctor?
If you're a White House doctor in this situation, I think you would certainly discuss it with the president and talk about the pros and cons. I think if you then ask, well, if President Biden says, well, if I'm your father, which patients often do, what would you recommend? I think the fact is that most White House doctors would recommend getting the test. And again, the evidence is, look at President Obama, President Bush, younger than President Biden, and they both got the test. There was some criticism when President Obama got the test that he got it too young and things. But I think in this case, especially for the president, thinking that he's going to live another decade, you would recommend to him to get the test. Now, I want to say there's people, and I'm one of them, that are sort of skeptical of this test and don't really want to have this test. But that is quite common. And I should say I have had this test, mostly to get insurance, interestingly enough. If you apply for insurance, this is one of the tests that they require, just like an HIV test and cholesterol screening tests and other things. So I think your speculation, Joe, well, most White House doctors would recommend this test to the president and would say, I think you should get it, is probably true. Now, the president has the ultimate decision. They just can't take his blood and, not talk to him about it.
Yeah, but certainly, Mika, especially if we're not even talking about living another 10 years, we were talking about the decision to run another 4 years. Certainly, this would be a test that would need to be taken.
Yeah. Zeke, are we operating on, just listening to you and Joe here, trying to figure out what to deduce here, but are we operating under the assumption that President Joe Biden had prostate cancer for at least several years and either did not test for it and then discovered it just now? Is that possible? And would a doctor, a White House doctor and the team, would they agree not to test for that?
Again, if you're a doctor respecting medical ethics, you talk about it with the patient. Do they want this test or not? You talk about the pros and cons. You talk about what the recommendations are of various organizations, including the American Urological Association, the American Cancer Society. So the ultimate decision is President Biden's. I would say that it is surprising he did not get this test, given the fact that the proclivity of presidential physicians is test more rather than less. And I think it's a little strange. We do know from the population, like I said, 7% of people diagnosed with prostate cancer get it diagnosed at the metastatic moment, when it's already metastatic. So it's not unusual that people can say, no, I don't want the test, or their doctor doesn't recommend it, or they don't get the test for one reason or another.
Grasping at every option here, is it possible he had the test, and can this test miss it?
Given the fact that the answer is of course, but given the fact that he has an annual exam, test is unlikely to miss it. Given the fact that it's a Gleason 9, which means it's pretty wild looking in the sense of underneath it doesn't look like a normal prostate cell. It looks like a prostate cancer cell, which looks more atypical. It's not likely that his prostate-specific antigen, his PSA, which is the test we're talking about, would have been in the normal range. It would have been elevated above 4, and that does say you should do something about it. Now, you might test it again a few months later and see if the number has gone up or gone down, that you got an aberrant reading for one reason or another. But that doesn't seem likely in this situation. Either they didn't test for it, or they test for it, they didn't report it, and